Hey, brave OTs. If you've been listening for a while, you probably know that I don't do a lot of solo episodes. It feels a bit uncomfortable to me, I think. It's that sense of in conversation, I connect more naturally. We leave room for different perspectives. It's an ongoing openness. And when I speak in monologue, it feels a little bit more like I'm telling you how it is. And that's not how I roll at all. But I'm going to get good at this. I'm going to practice this more, and I plan to come to you with more short and snappy solo episodes. I know a lot of people like the meandering back and forth that takes us in a lot of different directions with the interviews, or I don't even call them interviews, I call them podcast conversations because I like that to be a reciprocal sort of thing. Those are nice. And I can give you some shorter insights and share some of the things I've learned along the way. So, this is one of them. The topic of this episode is going to be about perfectionism and using skills you already have and know as the antidote. You don't get to this place of being an OT entrepreneur without a healthy dose of achievement orientation. It's hard to get into OT. It's hard to do the number of years of education that are required now to become an OT. And then you have to be pretty good at it to have that willingness to go out and do it on your own. So that achiever in you is really active and it's been helpful. Sometimes when we get a little in our heads with some self doubt when we're starting something new, the achiever in us might sway a little bit more toward perfectionism. I see it a lot. Anyone who wants to do something that's important to them within their business, put their name on it, really wants to do it well. You don't want to put subpar work out there into the world. For one, you're already worried about people judging what you're doing, and so if there are some flaws in it, oh, that really feels magnified to you. What will they think? What if I don't get it right? What if some people don't like it? What if some people scoff at it? It really can stop us from putting something really interesting and new out into the world. So I've got some ideas, and we're going to connect it to other concepts that you already believe in as a healthcare professional, as a therapist, as a business owner. You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. I'd like to first give you a little bit of context to preface the content that I'm going to be sharing. And this will serve as a little bit of an update and a share of what I've been up to lately. So, a few months back, I was asked by the University of Alberta to engage in creating an elective module for the spring session. We talked about entrepreneurship and coaching. As I considered the amount of time, I had about 13 hours to teach the content. I figured I needed to narrow it down to coaching or entrepreneurship. And I had a lot more to say about entrepreneurship. So that became my focus. I named the module Creating Possibility Through Entrepreneurship as an occupational therapist. And that sounded good, exciting. I knew how to do this, right? And then I got in my head and went, wow, okay, this isn't just me putting on a webinar that shares my personal experience. This is me teaching students in a university, and the level of information and evidence base and content really needed to be tight. And so my perfectionist was activated a little bit. But I think it was for good reason. I think that it really sent me in this direction of doing research. What's out there? Checking my assumptions, checking my experiences, checking what the evidence says, what the theories are that support these experiences that I have. Or maybe they don't support it. And I needed to be open to that too and explore in another direction. So I went digging and learning and listening and reading and exploring. and found some really cool stuff. And it really actually reminded me of when I discovered ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, because it really was the set of resources and frameworks that reflected how I saw things and how exciting was it to have that be a really validated approach that came with frameworks that were much better than the things I was putting together by meshing together my experience of CBT, behavioral activation, occupational therapy, those types of things. ACT kind of helped me organize that with tons of research and evidence. So that was really exciting. And the same sort of happened as I was exploring entrepreneurship. So I really focused in on the entrepreneurial mindset. So the way we need to be, the foundation, the building blocks that we need within us to then be able to be effective as entrepreneurs. It all starts with us. If we're starting our own business, we're creating our own product. We need to come into it in a certain way. And that's that sweet spot that I see when I'm helping people through my Activate Vitality program, which is for therapy business owners. We really do work on the inside to optimize the output. So some might call it, I guess, a top-down approach, or I think about it as an inside-out approach. Let's really create that foundation, those internal concepts, perceptions, ways of approaching things that enable us to handle any number of outside tasks in an effective way. And there's some really cool research that supports this. At the same time, I was invited to contribute a module in someone else's course on the entrepreneurial mindset. That was for Jess Reynolds. We just recorded a podcast conversation for the Brave OT podcast that will probably come out in a few weeks or a month. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you so you can learn more about it. But I thought, yeah, this is great. I can apply this stuff I've been learning and researching for the university module, put that in program, and then I was also invited to speak to a group of wellness professionals through healthy seminars, and I used some of that same content around the entrepreneurial mindset to contribute to that webinar. And so it's been fun to keep exploring, practice presenting, and share the really neat stuff that I'm learning. And one other exciting thing that's coming up in a few weeks, I'm going to be going to Australia and I'll be attending the Australia OT conference in Adelaide. My friend and colleague Bronwyn Paynter has asked that I participate in her Nature Day at the sanctuary. In Bronwyn's Nature Day, I'm going to be talking about entrepreneurship as the path to purpose. I'm really excited about that framing of entrepreneurship, not as the sort of big business, maximum profitability, but rather that ability to carefully craft and curate work that we love to do and that we can get paid for. Bronwyn's Nature Day takes place on Saturday, June 28th, just after the Australian OT conference at the sanctuary, which isn't too far from Adelaide. I would love to meet you if you're going to be in the area. I will put a link so that you can check it all out in the show notes. If you are at the Australian OT conference, please find me. I'll try and wear a Brave OT t-shirt or something like that to make myself a little bit more visible. But I would really love to meet all of the people that I've had these neat online connections with. Now, as you know, Jane sponsors the Brave OT podcast. And I have to tell you, my most favorite feature ever has just come out. I've been experimenting with it for the last few weeks, and oh my goodness, it's a game changer. Jane is a clinic management software built to help you focus on what matters most, your clients. Building rapport with your clients is important during appointments, and that can be challenging when you're trying to take timely and detailed documentation. That's why Jane built AI Scribe to help you document important information without the manual note taking. I was at a Jane Live event recently, and the person who heads up the AI Scribe development presented. His wife's an OT, and he came to this idea or this concept as he observed his wife writing notes in the evening while he did the dishes after supper. This feature truly transforms your session recordings into chart entries, and all you have to do is turn it on at the start of the session, end it at the end of the session, and this takes a session recording and turns it into a chart entry. And then you just have to review your notes, sign the chart, and then you're done. Since security is a top priority at Jane, AI Scribe was built securely in house to be fully HIPAA and PIPEDA compliant. With a tool you can trust, Jane helps you spend more time on your client's care. To learn more about how Jane can help you change how you feel about documentation, head over to the link in the show notes to book a demo and sign up. And if you're using my link, you are given a 1 month grace period on your new Jane account. So back to achievement, perfectionism, maybe even the word imposter syndrome comes up for you as you think about creating something new, innovating, and putting it out into the world. Imposter syndrome is a term I tend to use very selectively. It's really important to note the definition of this term and a little bit about the roots of it. And I've done a whole episode about this in the past. But the definition is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So, sort of this sense of, ah, like people are going to find me out. I am not meant to be here. I don't deserve any of this success. I didn't do it. I'm an imposter. Like, I really shouldn't be here. And this isn't just like, I'm scared to do something new. This is persistent, the persistent inability. So, that's a much deeper thing than the natural self doubt that comes up when we try new things. Of course, self doubt comes up when we try new things. That only makes sense. We are nervous. We haven't mastered it yet. We are figuring it out. And there is some risk to making a mistake. I mean, it's actually inevitable. It's almost certain we're going to make some mistakes as we're trying new things. So we have some doubt, and our nervous system really wants to keep us safe. So it brings in these thoughts of, who are you to do this? What do you think you're doing? You shouldn't be doing this. You don't know enough to do this. Stay in your bubble. It is safe there. That's what our nervous system does via our minds to get us to stay put. And if we think about imposter, the definition of imposter is a person who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. I don't think by you putting together a new framework or workbook or product out into the world, you're actually trying to deceive or have fraudulent gain. I really don't think that's the case when we tend to use the term imposter syndrome with ourselves. And then syndrome is a group of symptoms which consistently occur together or a condition characterized by a set of associated symptoms. This is a pathologizing. Let's not pathologize the natural process of having some doubt when we're doing something new. Let's just call it what it is. It's self doubt. Sometimes I call it the imposter monster. I bring in some of my ACT tools to rename it a little bit, lighten the hold of it a little bit. Oh, yeah, there's my imposter monster. Yep. I'm having some self doubt. My mind is telling me not to make any changes. I try to bring in those types of rebuttals when the self doubt. Everything I've learned about entrepreneurship points to the scientific method, the scientific process. You know this one. You're a scientist. You know that if we're conducting an experiment or even doing an assessment in order to identify a treatment plan for a client, we show up as a scientist. We observe the challenge, we seek to understand the problem. Maybe we do some assessments, maybe we do some explorations, maybe we take lots of notes, maybe we get a large sample size so that we can do a lot of observing and see these patterns. Then we form a hypothesis, create an idea of a solution, maybe even create a minimum viable product. And then we go about testing our hypothesis or solution. If we're thinking about this like a clinician, this is where we make a treatment plan, knowing that we might adjust it based on how things go with the next steps. Then we test our hypothesis as scientists. We conduct an experiment, we try it out. At this stage, we're thinking about this as an experiment, right? We go about trying to see if this thing is going to work. We are exploring the efficacy of this solution. Is this the thing, or does it need some changing? Similarly, that's how treatment goes, right? We try something out with a client, we see what that result is, right? So that next we evaluate the results. How did this experiment pan out with our client, with our experiment? We evaluate the results, then we revise and we go back and test that revision. How does that work out? Rerun an experiment, do a session with a client, and we continuously develop. Often, when we think about entrepreneurship, we think, I need to work it all out before I take this out to the real world because I might fall on my face and be embarrassed, right? We don't want to mess it up. We want to have it perfect before we go and take it out into the real world. And actually, that's a very unscientific way of doing things. It is actually much better to connect with the people who need the support, ask them all sorts of questions, explore with them, co create solutions that are actually going to be helpful and solve the real problems that they are seeing, and then create that first thing. We try it out with people, with real world people. I'd hate to see you go create a whole website and invest in design and production before having tested this thing out. And one interesting thing I've learned in this process of entrepreneurship is that also selling the product as you test it is an important part of gathering the data you need to see if this thing's going to fly. So if nobody wants to buy the thing that you're creating, let's say you make it a lower price. This is sort of, putting it out there as a beta test or something that you let people know that this is the first version. They are in on the ground floor. You're really excited to create the thing that works for them and you're seeking feedback. Therefore, they're getting in at this really great price. Being able to see that people actually want to buy the thing is an important data point for testing because the truth is in that uptake. If you're really going to your neighbors and friends and saying, "Hey, can you give me some feedback or try this thing out?" They're doing it as a favor solution because maybe they don't fully have the problem and there's a bunch of bias. That's not a great experiment. You really do want to test this out in the real world with real people and leave room to improve it. And so connecting your entrepreneurial endeavor to the scientific process as a way to conceptualize the most effective path toward creating solutions, developing products, innovating is key to being a bit of an antidote to perfectionism. There's just no room for perfectionism here. You have to approach this knowing that it will develop over time with real world feedback. It's actually a bit arrogant to think that you can perfect it without trying it with people. You really have to sort those things out in the real world, in the context. We know this, right? We're OTs. In the context where people are needing to perform, engage, do the things they do. So let's think like scientists instead of achieving perfectionists. This is really objective learning. There are no failures in the process. It's all data in this scientific process. And really, would we prefer to be co-creators with our clients? That's kind of how we work, right? So the people who are going to be the consumers of this product or this thing we're making, we really need to co-create with them. And that just feels like a more fluid thing. So thinking about it as a scientist, but also thinking about it as that clinician who's assessing the efficacy of a solution, identifying the problem, getting curious about it, trying new things, layering on explorations. The pathway to perfecting something is through putting it out there, getting feedback, and improving over time. I hope this has been helpful in providing a bit of a unique antidote to perfectionism and self doubt and imposter syndrome, if that's a term that you're comfortable using. This is the sort of thing we talk about a lot in real time in the Activate Vitality program. So, I'm going to tell you just briefly about the Activate Vitality program. It's a group program, coaching, mentorship, community. It's a place that we gather as international clinicians who own businesses, and we talk out the real world stuff. The stuff that comes up, oh crap, what's happening here? Or I didn't think to look there. Or I have been avoiding this email for eons because I don't know what to do about it. Or how do I set boundaries in my business? Is it appropriate to do this next thing? We're often in these little isolated bubbles by having our own practices and having a community of other people who are figuring the same things out, or maybe have already figured out the problem that you have in front of you, coming together and sorting through the things, and then also building in that internal flexibility to be able to respond to the big feelings and all the doubts and the uncertainty and the sticky thought places that we get stuck. It's really powerful to have a community of practice for that. So that's what we do in Activate Vitality. I, for the last year or so, have been opening and closing the doors to Activate Vitality. At this point, I'm looking at making a shift back to having it available more consistently. So if this is something that interests you, please reach out, send me a message. I'll put a link in the show notes for you to be able to reach out to me and just say, Activate Vitality. I'd love to learn more. And we'll figure out what to do with that. To give you some examples of the types of changes the OTs in the Activate Vitality program have experienced. On some recent calls, there's one OT who has had a really successful private practice. There is much more work than she can possibly do herself. She really wants to expand the capacity and availability of this type of service for neurodivergent young people in her area. And so she's hired a couple of OTs. And she's dealing with the growing pains of onboarding and training and working out contracts and how they're navigating those day-to-day challenges and going, "Oh, shoot, okay, this didn't quite fit," or "This provision I put in the contract has turned to this challenge." And that was coming with some really big feelings. And so we explored that and we figured out, how do we look at this differently? How do we look at this from that person's perspective? How do we look at this from the perspective of the contract? What can you actually change right now? Or what information needs to be provided to give context to the person in how they're seeing that element of the contract? The really important subtext of what happened in that conversation is that that person felt safe to share the nitty-gritty feelings of resentment creeping in, fear of all of this. What is this all worth? The doubts about, what am I doing? She felt safe to be able to bring those raw feelings onto the call. And then she felt really validated by not being judged for them, being heard in a place where people are like, "Yeah, I totally get it. And I've been there. I've done these things. These are some ways that I've been a contractor and seen things set up. These are ways that I've done it. And I'm sharing my experiences. Other people are sharing their experiences." And you could just see her level of emotional arousal come down bit by bit. "Oh, thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you for hearing me." Okay. You could see her breathe more easily. You could see her voice tone shift. You could see her shoulders come down a bit. And she came up with some solutions and next steps. And so often when we think about business coaching, we think about, what are those concrete solutions and next steps? Truly, you could probably work that out with ChatGPT. It was really being seen, heard, being in community, feeling safe, and coming into that place of co-regulation so that then she could be open to solutions and next steps and feel more confident and grounded and supported as she moves forward in those next steps. We're doing these types of things all the time as people come and bring these sort of day-to-day nitty-gritty challenges, and then we unpack and be with the feelings, create safety and community, explore, develop more skills. And this has a cumulative effect of actually becoming a little bit less emotionally reactive when the challenges come up, because there's that sense of knowing and feeling supported in your business, knowing that you could get on a call or a couple this week if you really need support. I really love that. I think in this world of AI coming in and providing us with all the answers we need at our fingertips, which can be overwhelming and sometimes imperfect, but there's a lot of information very easily available to us. And it's truly that human connection, co-regulation, that sense of community, that sense of feeling safe, and building that resilience inside as an entrepreneur that is going to be more and more valuable. And that's what we offer. And I'm really excited. So I'd love to talk to you if that's something you're interested in. Check out the links in the show notes and talk about Activate Vitality. As always, be brave, OTs. Thanks for being here. I'd also really love it if you have been enjoying the podcast, if you could go and follow, rate, give reviews. All the different podcasts have different things, but following makes a big difference. If there's a place for rating it in your podcast platform, I'd love to see 5 stars if you feel like it's a 5-star sort of thing, and even better, I know on Apple Podcasts, you can write a brief review, and that really goes a long way to helping the people who need to hear this podcast hear it. And as always, be brave, OTs.